Hi everybody, this is a supplementary video for some of the projects we're going to do for the color theory projects, and I just wanted to go over the different color harmonies again. I went over that in the other two lectures, and you have three basic color harmonies. I'm working here with the subtractive color wheel, which would be the color wheel for pigments, but you could work with either of those two. There's images of them in the assignments. And you have what we call triadic color harmony. Those are equidistant on the color wheel. I chose the primary colors. This is the notan that I had shown you in the other instructional video. Red, yellow, and blue. So you're going to be thinking about how am I going to balance the different colors in the designs that I'm translating it into. And you should watch the video on the notan expansion of squares for more specifics on that. Then you have what we call analogous color harmonies. Those are the ones that are close together on the color wheel. I have a cool tone. With these ones, you should do little swatches and say which harmony you're doing for each project. And then we have complements. Those are directly opposite each other on the color wheel. Those tend to create a dynamic effect because of the optical effects of complements. And here I used blue and orange. In the cool tone analogous, you have a more calming effect and a more harmonious effect, and I've got blue and blue-green in that one. Usually analogous color harmonies tend to create a stabilizing effect or I'm not sure what the word is, just more harmonious in general because they're close together in the tones. For the triadic, it tends to create a stabilizing effect because they're equidistant. And then we have some variations on those three main color harmonies. You've got the accented analogous, which means you would have one set of an analogous harmony, a warm tone in this case, with reds and orange and red oranges, and then I have a cool tone accent. So you could either have a warm tone analogous with a cool tone accent, which is often going to be a complement, or you could have a cool tone with a warm accent, for instance, if I put orange or red in there instead. You have a monochromatic harmony. That's the other major basic color harmony where you have only one hue, and in this case I've got tints and shades of red. Those tend to be very easy to work with because you're only working with tints and shades of one hue, and they tend to automatically be harmonious because of that. And then you've got the split complement. That's where you have a complement such as yellow, and instead of using violet, which is directly opposite of yellow, and which is its complement, you would use the colors that are on either side of the complement. So you would use red violet and blue violet instead of violet itself. And that's what I did over here. These I did with the Staedtler watercolor markers. And then the last two color harmonies that I have to show you are the tetradic. For the tetradic color harmony, you have four different colors. You often have, for the tetradic and for the square, which is just another variation of that, you have two sets of complementary colors. And they give you on the handout that you have to read the document, read all of that before you start working on anything because it has all of the details. And you want to think about balancing out the amount, the quantity of the colors, and they give you recommendations for that. And it often just depends on what you end up doing with it. And then you have the square. And for that, again, you've got usually two sets of complements. It's just the way it's organized on the color wheel is slightly different. So for the very first project, what you're going to be doing is you're going to take your three-tone symmetrical collage. Remember that balance design that we did, if you did it as a collage. And you're going to be translating that into a triadic color harmony. In this case, the student used red, yellow, and blue. And you can see you're equating the tones in the grayscale into color. So white would go to yellow because inherently on the color wheel that has the lightest value. Gray would go to red because that's a medium tone value, and then black would go to blue because that has a darker value. So whether this is the same, whether you're doing this as a collage or doing it digitally, I often recommend to do these digitally. For instance, you could scan your grayscale collage and then drop colors in on a digital program if you want to get the purest color that way. Or if you want to try it as a collage, you can do that. This is another example. I don't have the black and white version of this, but this was what the student did with their translation from the 3 tones in grayscale into the triadic design. Again, this is with red, yellow, blue, and you can see they've used the yellow as a way of accenting the focal point in the design. You've got an asymmetrically balanced design here. Beautiful feeling of movement and rhythm with all of the different shapes and the way he's placed the colors in this one. Then the next project is your color wheel, or sorry, actually the next project is the notan, but you watch a separate video for that. After that, you're going to start working on your color wheel. Now you can do a radial design like I did here. This is one I did a long time ago. And you can see that I sketched it out first. You should always sketch out everything first. I used that instructions from the diagram that I have in the lecture, where you use a compass to sketch out your design. And then I did this one in acrylic paint, which is probably the easiest type of paint for this type of project to work with because it's very even. It's a little bit easier to control, but you could use watercolor too if you want to do that. And I've used my primaries. Again, I'm working with the subtractive color wheel, red, yellow, blue. Secondaries, green, violet, orange. You can see they're directly opposite. These are the complements, yellow and violet, red and green, and blue and orange. And then for the tertiaries, I actually cut out a little separate shape where the hearts would overlap, and I painted it as the tertiary. So in between a primary and a secondary, you're going to have what we call a tertiary. So in between yellow and orange, you've got yellow, orange, and so on. And then in the center, you can either put white, because when all of the colors combine together, that creates what we call white light or daylight, or you could put gray or black in there. Depends on what you feel like doing with your design. But I always recommend sketching things out as usual. And then here's some other examples of the student color wheels that I think I had some of these in the lecture maybe. And you can see they used a radial balance. This was done digitally with the plimsolls. And this is actually using the subtractive color wheel. So you should have, if you're going to do a radial design, you should have your either the colors of the spectrum, or if you're doing even an asymmetrical one, or you should have, you could put your, if you're doing a more traditional color wheel, like some of the images that I showed in the lecture, you could have you should have the primaries, the secondaries, and the tertiaries. Here's another one someone did with tempera paint, and they glued everything together. So they've got their primaries and their secondaries and their tertiaries. Here's another one which was sort of an asymmetrical radial design for the color wheel with a beautiful feeling of texture. Here's another one. This was done digitally. You can see they kind of sliced everything together, kind of like a kaleidoscope effect for that one. This is another one someone did where they used the additive light color wheel, and they had just the colors in the spectrum, and they added it into the star. And this was their pointillist design, I believe, and one of the Albers projects. I'll show you those in a second. Here's another one someone did again. This looks more like the additive light color wheel to me. I think, maybe not. The way they've organized it is slightly different. And then you can also do something like where you just take an image that you draw, or images, and add the colors from the color wheel into that. And he's used the spectrum, the additive light color wheel, and added them into all these cute images. And this is one of the ones from the lecture where he took the colors from the color wheel and he added them into his designs, his fashion designs. Okay, so the last thing you're going to do is the series of Albers exercises. And I have some examples of those. The first design is one color looks like two. And you can see that you should really just do this simply. Don't try to do designs, just do the squares. If you have a cutout for the little squares, that's helpful. You can use a paper cutter too for the larger squares. And these two are going to be the same color, and then they're going to be on a color background. You can't do this with colors that are very intense, like fluorescent colors, and you can't do it with black and white, so you have to pick colors. And then you're going to look at the smaller square, which is the same color, and see how it changes. And this goes to the whole philosophy of Joseph Albers' idea about color and color theory, that color is relative. So depending on which colors it's placed next to, the warmth or the coolness can change, the value can change the intensity, saturation, and brilliance will appear to be different depending on which colors that color is next to. So this teal green, when it's on the blue, it looks lighter and less intense, and when it's on the yellow, it looks very intense and darker in value and more brilliant. So that's one color, looks like two, and you should label yours somewhere. I labeled these on the back. And then we have, oops, I got the wrong one here. It's called Three Colors. This one is Three Colors Look Like Two. And what happens for that one is it's not really three colors, it's one hue. You can see these are all tints and shades of blue. And they should be right next to each other. They shouldn't be separated like in the one that I just showed you with one color looks like two. The two background rectangles should be adjacent. And then what happens is you have one blue here. I did these, by the way, most of these with cardstock and or paint swatches. So you can just run over, if you want to try it with paper, you don't want to do it digitally. This one is easier to do digitally because you can get the exact color that you need. If you're doing it with paper, you might want to check out if you're going to get paint swatches at Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever. You know, you can actually look at the colors and see if it's going to work for different exercises. So this is one blue, this is another blue, and these are the same blue, but when this blue and the smaller square is on the darker background, it's going to reflect the lighter one. And when it's on the lighter one, it's going to reflect the darker one. Now, these are all experiments. You're not going to get perfection probably unless you're doing it digitally, and you can dial in the numbers for the colors that you want to use. But some rules to follow for this one, Three Colors Looks Like Two, is you don't want to have too much difference in the darkness and lightness between your two background tints and shades of whatever hue you decide to use. And you don't want to have changes in warmth and coolness in any of them. In the smaller version of whatever you use for the blue here, I use blue. And you don't want to have any very intense, highly saturated colors either. And the next Albers project, just move some of these away, is the red and blue designs. And this you can do as a design. I showed you a lot of examples in the lecture, or you can do it an objective, non-objective, abstract design like I did here. What you're going to do, I used paint swatches again for this, you're going to find as many different tints and shades of red and blue as you can. You're going to make up your design, whether it be a realistic design or something like this. And you're going to look at it and see which looks like the bluest blue to you. Now, this is going to vary according to your age and various other things, so everybody's different. And to me, this one, which is kind of like a navy blue, I look at that automatically and it looks like the bluest blue to me. You do the same thing for red. Make up your design. Unfortunately, these are older, so they're getting kind of worn down. And then you look at it and you see which looks like the reddest red. And for me, you know, I've got various different tints and shades of one hue red. For me, this one, the very more highly saturated red, looks red. And red is a very unusual color because it has such intensity and strong physiological effects, such as raising the blood pressure and causing excitement and things like that. And it also has a very different weight. You notice when I showed you the translation from that collage from gray went to red, it looks totally different. If you translate red into a grayscale, it loses all of that intensity, and which can create focal points and excitement in the design and everything. It appears to have more visual weight. Okay, the next project is Reverse Grounds, and this one I was not successful, but it's a nice design, so I'm going to show it to you anyway. I did this with cardstock. I have to do another one where I run out and I get some colors with the collage that work, or do a digital one. So you're going to be picking, you could pick complements like I did here, blue and orange, and really this color here should be crossing over. And then again, you're doing the same thing that you did in Three Colors Look Like Two. The crossover color should be reflecting back either ground. In this case, it didn't really work, and I ended up using even a different orange, but this color is supposed to be the same, the crossover color. And also, I did another mistake here. I shouldn't have used such a highly saturated orange here. It would have worked better if I had one that wasn't so intense. Oh, another thing to tell you, and I'll show you in the next one, this crossover color, whatever you use for your design part on the backgrounds, is going to be a neutralized version of your two grounds. And what that means is you're kind of mixing the two grounds together and it's getting a little bit gray, and that way it helps to reflect them back. Now this is an example of a student did a digital design, and you can see that he's done pretty much what I showed you from the examples in the textbook from Joseph Albert's students in his class. He's got the yellow and the very light violet background, and then he's got the two squares. Now really they should be crossing over, and they should be the same color. I don't think he really used the same color here, so this one isn't really done correctly. So look at the examples in the lecture. So I have some more examples of red and blue designs. This one was in the lecture. You can see beautiful collages he did. These were done with paint swatches. And these remind me so much of Henri Matisse's cut paper collage designs. He was a great figurative artist. I think I've talked about him in some of the lectures. You look him up, he did a lot of designs. At the end of his life, he was having a lot of physical problems and he couldn't paint anymore. And he started doing these cut paper collages because it was easier for him to do. And then he eventually did some stained glass window designs from them too. Here's another example of a red design the student did. And then the last example that I have to show you for this lecture is the bezel design. Now for the bezel design, you're going to be changing one color in your design, but you're keeping pretty much the same. And what I chose to change is the background. I changed from blue to yellow. This whole concept was discovered by Antoine Bezold, who was a rug designer. He discovered that when you changed either the background color or another color in a design, it changes the whole feeling and the whole aspect of the design. So these I did with little cutouts from those cutout things that I got. But you can do anything. You can do a sketch and do it that way. You can do it digitally. You can work with paint, with markers or pencils or whatever you feel like doing. Okay, and then there is one more. I don't have an example in this lecture, but I have an example in the assignment for the vibrating color boundaries. And for those, just go to the handout and you look that up, and it tells you which color choices you can use for that. And that's sort of another optical effect where you have certain colors, and they're going to, when they're placed next to each other, you're going to feel a vibrating boundary between those two colors. Okay, so those are all the projects. You can do them any way you would like to. I showed you specific examples for how to do them in the Notan expansion of a square video, so make sure that you watch that one too. This is just kind of a general lecture to talk a little bit about some of the other color theory projects that we're going to do, so have fun. Take care.